Everyone is unique. But when you find that journey that works for the entire family unit, everything falls into place. Family relationships, friendships, and their thoughts of what my future is, what their future profession and career goals are.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. In this episode, we spoke about homeschooling. I love homeschooling. Right now, I homeschool my child, and I've done so for the last almost 4 years. And we had a lot of beautiful moments and experiences and fun together. And I grew as a person and as a mom. It is a beautiful journey. Now, homeschooling can be difficult at times. It's so much easier to just send your child somewhere and get him back after 8 hours. But there are some cons to that. And if somebody has the opportunity or the capability of homeschooling and it aligns with their values and they feel it in their heart, then I would encourage them to go and try it on. Because sometimes the system is not the best thing for your child. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So you always want to watch your child and see, how is he or she doing? Are they happy? Are they blossoming, or do they shrink down? I think as a parent, it's been interesting for me to watch my child and try to push away those voices that were very critical of me homeschooling him. Almost like saying that he's not going to develop the right way, he's never going to socialize, he's never, and thank God, he's a very intelligent, smart, well-adapted young child. And yes, I need to do more socializing with him, and that was the hardest thing for me, still is the hardest thing for me because of where I live, but I wouldn't change it ever. And those 4 years were incredible. Mary Resenbeck is an experienced Montessori classroom teacher, theater instructor, educational manager, and a veteran homeschooling mom of 3 beautiful children. She has recently authored a book, Take Charge of Your Child's Education, discussing how parents can take an individualized and personalized maverick approach to homeschool their children successfully. Marie is very interesting. I really enjoyed my conversation with her, and it will teach you a lot about the benefits of homeschooling and how to do it the right way. And without further ado, on to the show. Hi, Mary, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Yes, I'm very excited to be talking to you. Before we begin, can you share your origin story and how did you get involved with homeschooling?
Sure. When I was a young mother, I knew that my son was struggling with reading, and my husband had a history of dyslexia. So immediately I was very worried about him entering the traditional school setting, because I too had had issues academically in school, and I was worried about him being in a position where he was not going to get his needs met, and then with that begin to get bullied and things like that by his peers. So I entered education. I actually got a position at his school. It began as a theater instructor, and then I moved into Montessori, and I began teaching Montessori in Montessori school, and it was also a performing arts school. And I could keep really close tabs and see exactly how my son was going through his educational journey. And throughout that journey, I had another daughter. Her name was Alexis, and she exhibited the same signs as my son did. She had a little extra bonus with math, and it's called dyscalculia, and basically that's math dyslexia is what they like to call it today. And so things were great in elementary school because I was a teacher there, so I was able to work directly with the colleagues. I got the kids tested through the district. We had a clear plan on what those modifications and accommodations would look like, and they were also tested as gifted. So we had to make sure that they were being challenged academically as well as being able to follow through with traditional expectations. Again, everything was going really nicely until middle school. My son entered a public school system, and it just was really failing him. It was failing him academically. Because he was gifted, he began to be bored, but at the same time, he was falling behind academically with the reading and the writing because the expectations were so high, but yet the accommodations through his IEP were not being met. And so I had people during IEP meetings, teachers, say that, he's bright, he'll figure it out. We have a lot of kids in our class, and we have behavioral issues that we have to pay attention to. Yeah, he's great. He'll be fine. Well, that's unacceptable, right? So that's unacceptable. I understood being an educator as well of what that looks like, testing expectations and having, 30 kids sometimes in your classroom and things like that. I could empathize with that, but just because they're unable to handle the situation doesn't mean that your children have to be collateral damage behind all that. So I brought them back to the private school that I taught at, and my daughter also joined me. But then as high school moved on, that little tight-knit bubble that I had created with my colleagues popped. And when they entered high school, it was almost like they had no IEP at all. And it didn't matter how many meetings I had, and it didn't matter that I showed them different paths for them to be successful because they had it in their mindset, because they were so bright, they were faking it and they don't have time for this, and I was coddling them. And it was really hurting their self-esteem. I saw their self-esteem that was really high because they're very, very talented and gifted in so many areas like theater, also my daughter and fine art, and that self-esteem was crashing, and it was crashing fast. And when educators are pointing out students in the classroom and saying there's a problem, they're not trying hard, peers align with that. And so their peer groups started changing. They started losing friends. And so this became such an impact that I pulled them out and we jumped in with our feet first and began homeschooling and never looked back. And I'm currently now homeschooling my 9-year-old. And she knows no different. So she's only been homeschooled her whole life.
What was the most challenging moment of your homeschooling journey, and what was the most rewarding one?
The most challenging, of course, was not quite knowing how to navigate it. I wanted to make sure that they were getting a quality but also personalized and individualized education. And I noticed that when I entered for my children the public school homeschooling, that really did not work well. And so then I kind of felt like, I'm at a loss, because the homeschooling for us, this is not for everyone, homeschooling through the district became the same kind of attitudes as it was just in the brick and mortar. So I wanted to get away from that. And I didn't really know, because I had been in basically the traditional setting for so long, that there were different avenues to take. So I just really researched. And what I found was there's private umbrella schools that will absolutely help you through different curriculums that you want to choose, but you truly are the teacher. You truly are the one that manages each of your children's educational needs. So there is no overseer in that, and that worked really well for us. And of course, the kids at that time were in high school, and so they were also worried that what I was doing was gonna not be right, or in the long run, they're gonna find out that it didn't work out because it wasn't accredited in this way or that way. And what I had to do is just tell them, trust me, just trust this journey we're on. We're going to do this together. And I promise you, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. And let's just move forward with it. And they totally did. They trusted me. And the first thing I did, which was the positive, was let go of all of that traditional mindset that I had been having since I went to school, that it has to be exactly this way. If it isn't done this way, then it's wrong. If you don't go in this direction, that means that they have no future. You're setting your kids up for failure if you don't follow the district or the public schools traditional mindset. And I had to throw that in the garbage. And the moment that I threw that in the garbage was when everything changed for the better, and extremely positively. And that is when I was able to look at my children as individuals, see what their passions, their talents, their gifts were, build on that, pay attention to life skills, build on their self-esteem. Things that were difficult for them were now manageable because they were not stressed out. And so it all kind of fell into place. When education situation works for the family. Everyone is different. Everyone is unique. But when you find that journey that works for the entire family unit, everything falls into place. Family relationships, friendships, and their thoughts of what my future is, what their future profession and career goals are.
What are some common misconceptions when it comes to homeschooling?
Oh, there's many, and I'm really a myth buster when it comes down to this. Usually, I highlight on kids with special needs and also gifted children. And the first thing that I'll hear is, oh, you're not qualified for that. You don't have a degree for that. You don't understand exactly what's going on with the child. Only experts know exactly what's going on, and they're the only ones that can help them. Well, the experts that I had working with them were not helping them at all. And so for me, I had to change that mindset, especially with, friends and families and fellow colleagues. And basically through that was I listened to my gut. I listened to my children. And for the first time, we did deschooling, which means I took away all of those in the box type thinking for them. And that was unbelievable because they were free now. And everyone's like, oh, so now they're learning nothing. Okay. And so that was a myth number 2 that had to be broken. Not only were they learning, they were experiencing. My son was now a technical director at the local community center for performing arts. My daughter was already taking 2 college courses that were having her perfect in her art. Everyone said, you'll never get into college being homeschooled. That's the other myth. Never. No college will ever accept you. That is a myth. In fact, more colleges are looking at homeschool applicants because they see the diversity that they have under their belts. And whether they're world schoolers, traveling around the world, experiencing different cultures and different avenues. So the 2 colleges that were their top choices was my son was looking to go to a performing arts school in LA, and my daughter wanted to do a fine arts school with also digital animation and other facets of art in Laguna Beach. They got in right away. They have their bachelor's degrees. My daughter now is looking into getting her master's in Ireland, and my son is in Nashville, and he's an executive producer for a restaurant, and he's also opening up his own production studio. So all of those scare tactics that people have misconceptions about homeschooling, I just nipped it in the bud. But there's always one famous one that comes up, the number 1. They'll never be socialized. They'll never have a friend. That is the biggest misconception in the world. In fact, you find your community in so many different ways, and that's what I do. I help people find those communities. And once you do, then you are actually socialized in a better way because you are working with multi-ages. You're working with sometimes younger kids all the way up through adults, working with them. There's so many different avenues. So they're well-rounded socially. It's not only just with their age group.
Homeschooling my child, I found that my biggest challenge was socialization because we don't live in a community. We live in a private house in a neighborhood that actually I don't see kids here. And I was a part of kind of like a homeschooling pod, but since their values and my values did not align, I found that I had to leave. And when I left, it was leaving, the friends, and they didn't have that many friends there too because there was some age gap. But my challenge, and it still is every day, is socializing him. That's why I'm going to sign him up for school next year for 4 hours a day. It's a pre-K. It's a pre-K actually, because he was born in September. So I wish if I didn't have that challenge, I would probably homeschool him more. Well, what's your take on that?
Well, now that, you talk about that, when we first dove into homeschooling, the first place that we chose really didn't align, like you said, just didn't align with our values, what we were looking for as, kind of a cultural influence and everything like that. So, you just kind of keep researching and keep looking. Where are you guys located?
Miami.
Okay. You're in Florida, so I could probably look up places and for you to maybe explore and things like that. But a lot of times enrichment centers are the way to go because it's a place where you can pick and choose the different classes that they take. And it's kind of like an a la carte situation. It's not a school though. It's enrichment vendors that go into maybe a campus that the director has rented for this purpose. And then you can pick and choose which classes you're looking for. And that way you can find your community. is what I like to say, is right for your family and right for your child. And so it is kind of like you do have to research that sometimes and kind of explore those. But your son is so small right now. I mean, he's really small. So to me, he would benefit from like a pre-K and a preschool. I think that my daughter she did actually go to a pre-K. So I retract that she's never been in a school setting. She went there from 3 to 5. And it was a wonderful little experience for her. It was perfect little school. It was, aligned with us. It was when she went into kindergarten and up is when that changed for me. So we went into a charter school that was district based, and that went okay. It wasn't horrible. It was great. I work with the district all the time, so I don't have anything against the district. I think they're fabulous. I think there's times, though, that they are overwhelmed and overloaded, and so that's why people fall through the cracks. Students fall through the cracks like this. But it didn't work for us in the long run. And so now she's back at her private homeschool umbrella. But she doesn't really take a lot of classes from them. They help me with maintaining the attendance. I give them, her grades. They keep all of that record keeping that I don't personally want to do. But she goes to a whole different campus because they have more of the things that she likes. She likes a lot of theater. She likes a lot of art. She likes a lot of those things. So you can be at one place and get one service and then be at another place to get that socialization and those enrichment classes. So there are those options that a lot of times people don't know anything about.
And how do you look for it? You go and you Google enrichment centers, or there are other names for that?
Yes, homeschool enrichment centers, because if you go on and just say enrichment centers, then you're going to get after school care and after school enrichment centers, which are also great places to be. But you're looking more of a homeschool enrichment center. And I know that this is how this works here in San Diego. Off the top of my head for Florida, I don't know exactly what their homeschooling policies are. I know that it is legal to homeschool in Florida, and I'm pretty sure that they would have some of the same types of services that California offers. So that's what you would be looking for, though. You would Google in homeschool enrichment centers, and then what would pop up are centers that would provide you with different classes and different teachers, and depending on the laws in your state, you might even be able to get funding for those classes if you did go through your district. So that's great. This happens on our ends. I actually don't choose to get the funding because I do it privately with her, like I discussed. But many of my students that I teach my enrichment classes to get the funding. And it's significant. So it really helps a lot of families out that have, different financial situations.
Do you feel like it's cheaper to go to public school, or is it cheaper to homeschool?
It's the same. I mean, really and truly, a lot of people say you have to be rich, to homeschool properly. A lot of times I'll hear that too. And that's not true. Now, if you have a ton of money to spare, I mean, it can make it, you can get all these bells and whistles, but that's actually not necessary to homeschool. And sometimes people will stop from homeschooling because they're like, I'm not qualified to teach algebra, or I'm not either. I promise you, I am not qualified to teach algebra. But I can find a qualified teacher that you can make into the schedule that can fill in those holes too that parents are sometimes scared of doing because they're fearful. A lot of times it's money. What about my job? How do I still maintain a workplace where I'm still bringing home money? I need to do that. And again, so many different avenues. You can hire an educational manager, a consultant, someone that can take your high school child and give them a very good schedule that'll be based on their needs. And so there's many different avenues that you can take to get there. But yeah, socialization is key. You really do want to keep your kids socialized, of course, right? We don't want to isolate children at all. But there are avenues out there. There are, like I said, I didn't know any of them were even here until I found them. Like umbrella schools, terms like that, enrichment centers. Always put the homeschool in front of it though, because you will get other information for more traditional schooling.
What I really like about homeschooling is that you follow the child and what they are interested in, what they need. Because when you put kids in mainstream education, it's like not everybody fit into that way of learning. I don't think it's normal for a child to sit on their butt for 8 hours, 6 hours a day.
Me neither.
It's not normal. Like the way we do education is not.
Well, it's 200 years old, pretty much. We've not changed anything. We're right now doing an interview where we have all this technology, all of this change in the last even 50 years, but school has remained the same. And that is a problem. The structure of the way school is delivered has primarily not changed in at least 150 to 200 years. It's the same. If it's one room schoolhouse or a big campus, you go into the classroom, you're sitting down, you're expected to stay still and listen to a lecture, and then paper and pencil it, and then the test. And this is dinosaur stuff.
But you know what? Like it's made to create good soldiers or good citizens.
Right.
Follow the rules. You know, you're from a very young age. You have to like follow the leader. What the leader says is the whole truth. Don't think for yourself. Do what everybody is doing. Wear the same uniform. You are a part of the whole. Like it takes away in a way free thinking and being an individual. And I mean there will always be those like bright kids that will rebel and do their things. And in many cases people just it's almost like numbing them from critical thinking or numbing them from finding their true passion or their true desires or their true gifts. And then people go and they're like in their 30s and 40s and like, what's my passion? What do I want to do in life? I don't know. I was in this system for so long. I've been programmed for so long and now I have to find my way.
Right. Also think about all the kids that are going from high school straight to college because they're told to. They're told to. So they don't even know what they want to do. So then they float from one major to another major to another major. And what do they have for it? They have debt, and then they still don't quite know what to do. You know, I know that my children knew exactly what they were going to do. They knew exactly the field that they were going into. So that's a different situation. But just to flounder just because of you need this degree to what? I mean, to go where? And we also forget about vocational schools. We forget about technical schools. We forget about asking the child what they want to do, right? And so that's why I'm passionate, not only about homeschooling, but alternative learning in general, because the learning has to change and the way we're delivering learning has to change. And homeschooling does that for you. And it provides you many different methods. Like I mentioned, deschooling. Well, then when I deschooled, we unschooled for a long time. And people have a misconception of unschooling meaning that they're not doing any schooling at all. That's wrong. You're following the child's lead. You're following exactly what their passion and their talent is. Then there's world schooling. I did that with my little one, my youngest right now. I mean, talk about really getting a lot of socialization, but also cultural experience and being able to not just look at the food in the book and the picture in the book or have somebody telling you about it. Taste it, feel it, be a part of it, be a part of the community. Then there's also, Montessori type of schooling and enrichment centers that you can look into. There's all kinds of different methods and techniques that homeschooling allows you to explore. And that is extremely important to me, and I'm passionate about it. Because, like I said, when you find that perfect journey that the child goes on, education never becomes something that they go, oh, I don't want to learn. You want to make learning a lifelong tool that they're excited. Because, honestly, when you don't want to learn anymore, then living becomes very dull, right? And a lot of times kids are turned off by learning. They're turned off by sitting down and come on, let's create this or let's, read about this, because they're not up to par with what the system is saying they're supposed to be. So that self-esteem drops. Peers start making that a problem. And so learning is now a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It doesn't resonate as a wonderful experience. And that's what homeschooling allows you to do. Really does.
Yeah, my friends homeschooled their children until they were like 9 and 11, and they had no problem to get into a school. They knew everything, and honestly, they are the most, I don't know, like well-behaved, intelligent kids I've met. Seriously, the oldest one, she reads like a book a day or something crazy like that. She reads a lot, and they both are so unique and such good kids.
They're well-rounded. That is what you're allowed to do. You're allowed to teach the whole child. And so that child is well-rounded. And so they're experiencing things, that other children that are trapped in a classroom with the exact same age range and with one person or even multiple people doing the exact same thing day after day after day, you're really missing different aspects of that child's individuality.
What I'm really afraid of in schools, and that's something that I've experienced, cliques between kids. Like I wasn't the popular kid. I had a very heavy accent. My clothes were different. And there was specifically like this one girl there that she was kind of like the leader, and she had some guys around her all the times, and she would always say like really mean things. And like I never ever want my son to ever experience something like this in schools, but it's so common. How do you protect your kid in any environment, even in the homeschool environment, things like that can happen. When kids come together, depends on their background, depends on their parents, depends on something they watched on TV. You never know where the influence comes from. These things can happen. So have you ever encountered bullying? I mean, you have, because your kids were like, you had the teachers telling the other kids that your kids are not good enough, so the other kids, I guess, bullying them in a soft manner.
Oh, sure. Well, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was like, you can read. You just go ahead and read. Like they were just really chastising them more than, anything else. And my daughter, she took it to heart. I'm really sad. She got sad about it. My son just got kind of meaner. He just kind of got angrier about it, right? So that's how they were handling it. But yes, like you said, bullying can happen on the street. It can happen anywhere. Right? And homeschooling is one of those places, like if you do go to an enrichment center or if you go to a different place where you guys are gathering and coming together, there is that, possibility of bullying happening. But the great thing about homeschooling is you're right on top of it. You're right there. You can acknowledge it right away. You can go to the parent and talk to the parent. Sometimes they're not open to talking to you, so you can just turn and walk away and not be a part of that. Sometimes when you're in a public school situation, the parent feels trapped and the child feels like they still have to go to school, even if they're being terribly bullied. You go to the administration and it's falling on deaf ears. And now the family's stressed and the child's scared to go to school. Now we have tummy aches. And now we have, all of the anxiety illnesses that come up, anxiety-based illnesses that I can't go to school. I've got a sore throat. My tummy hurts. And the parent doesn't quite know what to do. In a homeschooling setting, a parent knows what to do. Bye. Okay. And then you go find an entirely new community. And that's the same with enrichment teachers too. Sometimes, you'll fall on a teacher that, maybe is just not the right fit. And it's not something like you have to go to the administration now. I have to get my child taken out of that class now. Is there a new teacher? No, it's bye. Okay. And that's it. It's over. And then you can move right along. I had a situation where I had a client where her daughter had special needs and the public school system was not only not giving her accommodations, they were basically giving up on her. And so some depression and some serious mental health issues started happening. And the number one thing for me to do was to protect and build her self-esteem. And that's what we did. We de-schooled just like my other two kids. And then I went into unschooling with her. And then we gradually went into enrichment programs. And there were moments where teachers were not listening to me. They were not adhering to me. So instead of worrying about it, I just went by. And I would get her out of there before anything would happen. And then I would find another teacher that would align with what I needed from them to make her successful. And with that, she really didn't get any of the self-esteem hits that she would have as she went to a traditional school. If a teacher didn't get it or they weren't being proactive with it, you just remove it. You can just bye. That teacher is not going to be your teacher anymore. And here's a new teacher that actually is going to follow what you need to make you go through this subject matter and be successful with it. And she graduated. She graduated in 2022. I was with her all through 4 years. And then she rolled over and got a job as a TA because she also took college courses and got her teacher's assistant certificate. So she began as a TA and now she's moving into adult care. And so it's been very successful, but it could have been a complete tragedy. So with homeschooling, with bullying, anything like that, whether bullying from the peers or bullying from an educator, you have complete control to be able to remove that immediately. So the damage is very limited.
And I just did, I took my little one, he's almost 4. I took him to gymnastic classes, and it's a Russian school, and I know Russian people. I like Russian people. They're very cool.
Me too.
Yeah, they're cool, they're straightforward. In their education, though, they can be really, really rough, very rigid. I don't mind rigid. And that teacher, I mean, he liked her. She gave him little presents after every class. But I was watching the class, and every once in a while, I had this like uncomfortable feeling that she was like kind of like manhandling him a little too much, like dealing with him in a rough manner. But he didn't seem to be hurt. He seemed to be really happy after every class. So I just kind of like pushed to the side. But 2 weeks ago, I'm with my back to the window, but it's almost like God was like, turn your head right now. And I turned my head, and he was like, he was just being like a 3-year-old, like running around, maybe not standing in a perfect line. Like I don't need him to be going to the Olympics. I just need him to to move his little body.
No, I totally get that, right?
And I see her grabbing his arm, and I couldn't hear the sound, but grabbing his arm, pulling him to the line, and he's looking at her with his big eyes, and he's like, ow, and he's holding his hand. And I was like, okay.
Okay.
Honestly, I didn't feel like me giving any feedback would change the situation because she doesn't speak English and there is broken communication anyways. So I just stopped taking him.
Yeah. And that's the power. Look at that. You have the power.
Yeah, I just stopped taking him. It might not be a big deal for somebody that's coming from that culture, but for me, I'm like, I'm paying you to teach my son, not to hurt my son.
That's right. And you have every right. See, that's what I'm telling parents. Sometimes they feel like almost like too scared to, really dive deep in their child's education. I always tell them, no, that's part of your plan as a parent. And that's why I wrote the book, Take Charge of Your Child's Education. But the title alone is advice that I give every parent that I speak with. Because a lot of times when parents call me, they're in tears. They're in tears because it's usually start of a new year. They already know that their child is not going to have their modifications. And a lot of times with these kids, even if they're gifted, they get labeled as ADHD and things like that. Not that they might not have that, but it's because they're bored, okay? And so they want to go on and do other things, but the educational system kind of stops them where they're at, where they have to be where everybody else is at, because they don't have time to even really look after the gifted kids, unless they want to push them forward, which is another problem because they're still chronologically their age. So there's a lot of times kids will already feel defeated, before the school year begins, and they come to me like, help, what do I do? And the first thing I say is, you have the power. I just show you the way to guide through it, to be able to navigate it. I'm your liaison.
Let kids be kids. They have their whole life to get smart and like book smart.
My goodness, 100%. And you have a lifetime to learn. And you want that lifetime of learning to be a positive one. I mean, if you look at kindergarten when I was a kid, kindergarten we were coloring. There was a kitchen set in kindergarten. It was a lot like what you would call preschool today. And now kindergarten's like, if you're not doing second grade work by the time kindergarten is, it's like, what is the rush? Why are we rushing? What is the point? Why can't a child be a child? Why are we trying to rush things?
Yeah, actually, my coach told me that teaching kids earlier came from the UK, 3 to 6 or something like that, where they need to develop more of their intuitive side. And when you bombard them with logic and numbers and letters, they don't develop that part. Therefore, lately they see a lot of those kids that have gone through this system. When they get to university, they have a part of them that was not developed at that age, and so they deal more with like depression and problems with socialization and a problem with addiction.
Right, 100%. And here's what I noticed too. Last time I was teaching in a traditional manner, where I was in a traditional classroom, I had a combined class of 3rd and 4th graders. And I cannot tell you, and I had never experienced this, so I mean, this was back in 2018, a 9-year-old coming to me, telling me that they were so depressed that they were thinking of taking their own life.
Oh my goodness.
And that threw me for a loop. I had never experienced that. And then as time went on, I realized that there were a bunch of these little tiny kids. Even thinking about it for a second is unusual to me. But he was deeply depressed. I did jump in, and he's fine now, and his mom is but I actually quit the school. I mean, it was a big drama. I got so angry that nobody was paying attention to what was happening that I ended up quitting after I made sure he was safe. I quit, and that's when I ended up taking my client, the one I just told you about, and moving her into homeschooling and starting my business, because that was disturbing to me. That also told me that the education system is failing our children in such a large way that it's just not even, this is very serious. To me, that's 911 when a child speaks that way, because children, they're not wired that way. That's not something that they're wired to think about at that age at all. Now, after puberty and then, all of that stuff, this is pre-puberty. This is no hormones. This is nothing. And that's got to stop. That's got to end. And he was getting chastised by the other teacher that he had before me. And she was bullying him. And so I had to go take care of that. That's a whole nother story. It's a whole nother podcast.
Oh, that's very interesting. When looking back at the last almost 4 years with my son, homeschooling him, I will never want to do it any other way. And I'm privileged enough that I have a flexible schedule so I can do it. And the great thing is that like those memories and, going to museums and doing a lot of very experiential things with him and traveling with him. And, today we were drawing together. It was really, really fun. I mean, it's really, really fun. And some days I feel exhausted. Most days I feel exhausted. I feel so tired.
Of course.
It's tiring. It's a big commitment. If you want to do it right, it's a big commitment. For somebody who's got like a full-time job, what are some of the, at least I guess you can't do full-time, but somebody's got a part-time job that is not flexible. What will be some practical tips that you can give them or give me to make this a bit easier where you can find time to yourself?
Well, there's many different options. So if you work part-time and you want your child to be socialized and you want them to take a class or two, but you need to be able to go get your hair done. You need that moment, that me moment to recharge.
I know, yes.
And be able to feel like I'm a human, not just a mom and a wife and all that stuff.
And a cook and a cleaner.
Again, those enrichment centers may, not all, but may have drop-off plans. And those drop-off plans can be for the hours that you want, okay? Enrichment center that I teach at right now for homeschoolers, this director has drop-off plans for half day. So you can drop off your child from 9 to 12 and then pick them back up, or 12 to 3, or do full day. Sometimes parents work from Monday through Thursday, or Monday through Wednesday, or maybe just Mondays they work at a place. And so they drop them off there and then they can pick them up and do the remaining of homeschooling, like maybe on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So there's many different ways to go about it. One of my clients she worked so full time that I had to find all these opportunities for her. So that's where I talk about, because she worked like 40 to 60 hours a week. There was just no way for her to do any of that. But she was able to hire an educational manager. And so that's somebody who kind of manages them, but also takes them, drives them. You see what I'm saying? Takes them to the places that they need to go, or make sure that if they're going to be strictly online, make sure that they're getting it done. Accountability, kind of a person. Depends on what you want. But there's a lot of different avenues where families can still maintain their job, maintain their work, and still have a homeschool, kind of a hybrid feel that they are the ones that are in control of, again, the classes, the places that they're going, and how exactly personalized that looks.
And what is the difference between a full day of school compared to a full day of an enrichment center?
Okay, so a lot of people ask that. Well, because these classes that you're taking, now you can do it any way you want. There's some people that only use the enrichment center for reading, math, and the writing, and to kind of just take that off their back. Or some people use enrichment centers to get those quality teachers that can teach those subjects that they don't have the knowledge for. But there's a lot of times that parents want enrichment centers to do things like theater, dance, karate. So you can actually take all of those requirements for PE. So you're taking art classes. So you're taking classes that are not sitting in the classroom being lectured to. These are extracurricular is what they would call them in a traditional school setting, but you can infuse it into the curriculum that you are doing. So I know personally a lot of parents that work Monday through Wednesday. And so their kids, like I said, are sometimes half day or sometimes full day. So that might consist of theater class, a cooking class, a sewing class, a dance class, a PE class, which could be, again, karate.
That sounds like a place I want to go to right now.
Oh, it's fun. You can do mechanics. They do mechanics there. They have a car out there. You see the kids working on the car. This year she's going to have a woodworking place. So again, it sounds and it moves a little bit like a traditional school because they have lunch together. They have breaks together. There's aides on campus. I'm a teacher. So I'm one of the many. But what's so interesting is I'm not hired by the director. I'm my own business. So I'm a vendor. So each of our teachers are our own businesses. So again, you don't have to worry about, oh, Johnny didn't really like the Kung Fu teacher. That's, not going to spread amongst the colleagues that, the chopping block. That doesn't matter. She's just going to leave that business model and go over to a new business model. It's really a whole different way to look at education.
That's beautiful. Where do you see the future of homeschooling?
Oh, I don't see it slowing down. I only see it growing and expanding. And I also see a lot of educators wanting in because of many reasons. They like the freedom. They don't particularly like somebody over their shoulder telling them how to teach. 90% of these people that are slapping down these scripts that they're supposed to read and not waver from have never even taught anything. They've never even been in a classroom. They're frustrated with that. So they're interested. Low pay. Well, owning your own business. Now I have a 16-week class. Parents pay me $255 for 16 weeks. So my salary or whatever, I don't even know what to call it, I get paid way more than I did in a traditional setting. So it's a business. So it's really interesting. And now somebody might accuse me of trying to privatize education. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I'm just seeing the different avenues that have been created that give all of us different roads that actually match our personalized, individualized needs as families and as children and students in the community.
Yeah, especially in the recent years, the very recent years, the last 2, 3 years, I've heard about, schools doing things behind the parents' back. And kids consenting to crazy things at a very young age, and the school doesn't even have to share anything with them. It's almost like the kids, they become the property of the school.
Absolutely. And there's, a lot of the homeschoolers are about being able to really pay attention to what is being taught to their children and what's being told to their children. We are parents. These are our beautiful babies that we love with all of our hearts and soul, and we are never the enemy to our children. We are only there to help them grow and become productive citizens and to make this world a better place. And anytime a person comes to me and says that they are unhappy with what the academics in the classroom is saying, what they're paying attention to, what they're delivering, I always tell them, if it isn't aligning with you, if you're not comfortable with it, and if it's something that you don't want your child to experience, take charge of it. You have the power. Your hands are on that steering wheel. Don't be scared to make those changes to make sure that your children are as safe as possible and are absolutely growing in the manner that you see your child growing in.
That's beautiful. I love that. What are your 3 top tips to live in a stellar life?
Oh my goodness. Well, the number one thing is to not let fear take hold. Sometimes fear can take hold of an individual, and I know it's happened to me, and I know that it stops progression. It stops moving forward, and sometimes when you're able to do that, you revolutionize things. The other stellar thing I think is important in life is being able to admit your mistakes and not be stubborn about making mistakes, but take those mistakes and always learn from them. Because I always tell my children and my students, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not learning, because that's the basis of growth. And I guess my third one is to basically really show up for people where they're at. that. That's really been very positive for me to do. And so if somebody's throwing me junk, I don't take it personally. I look at maybe where they're at and understand that that's something that they're going through, but it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with me. In other words, people are talking about me behind my back. It's none of my business. I mean, that's kind of how you have to take the bull by the horns in this life. So those are my 3.
Thank you. Where can people find you and what type of services do you offer?
Okay, I am a homeschool parent coach and parent liaison. I also am a IEP advocate for families that have children with learning differences, ADHD, autism, also gifted children. I also work with traditional families to find different exciting educational paths, and especially through homeschooling. And you can find me on my website, maryresenbeck.com. You can also just look up Mary Resenbeck and you'll see me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm also on Twitter. And you can also, if you want to kind of get a quick read or something, I have a book, Take Charge of Your Child's Education. You can find that on Amazon or my website.
Thank you so much, Mary. This was a pleasure. I really appreciate that conversation.
Oh, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember, don't let fear take hold on you. Be able to admit your mistakes and learn from them. Show up for people where they are and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.